Earth in the ground, you know. So then they said that, and Bill, he's also was an Elk. He'd had the Elks Lodge donate the flag. We thrived a lot on donation programs. So they said, well, let's run that flagpole. Let's run that flag out. Well, up on the top of the hill, right near us by the gym, there was a flagpole up there. So the group adjourned up there, ran the flag up there. Says, okay, now we ought to have the national anthem. What are we going to do now? We have no band, no orchestra, no anything. Bill Ford, he's a singer too, on the top of everything else. So Bill came up with a rendition of the national anthem. So now the college was open for business. Well, the reason I'm relating all of this is because it kind of relates the way we did things and the way the community was involved in things. And you notice in this whole thing, there were no staff people involved in this at all. This was the community, and it was their college. And I think Rand Hill, when he wrote the history of the community college, the written part of it, he came up with the phrase, the People's College. Mm-hmm. And I think I explained so much about the beginning of the college.
Yeah. What a great beginning.
Time for the childhood education or child care facility there. So that was made to order for me to go down there. So I have pictures of
and see what an impact you made, because how many years ago was that? And Josh remembered it clearly.
That's beautiful. Well, now where do we go from here?
Let's talk a little bit about the Job Corps, the physical plant.
Okay.
And because I think that's a good segue from where you started off with
yes.
the beginning of the college. So, we ready?
Rolling.
Good. You've been rolling the whole time?
Actually, I rolled for a little bit of the Santa Claus conversation.
Good.
Yeah.
A little extra.
Yeah. Henry, you talked a little bit about the first, actually the first day of the college and kind of an open house that they had. The college was a Job Corps facility, and it must have been quite a challenge to create an actual college campus out of it. Let's talk just a little bit about that.
Yes, that's true. It was really quite fascinating. When I say we weren't able to get on it, they would let selected people on, like myself and the business manager and architect and a few others to go ahead and get on it. But they always went with the caretaker of the place. He had to go with us and so on. But we saw lots of possibilities here, and it depends so much, especially in community college work, to see what can be done instead of saying it can't be done. And as we looked around, we said, these barracks around here, it was a Job Corps facility, and the barracks, we said those can be torn out, those can become classrooms. We had some shops there that we could convert it over into our vocational programs. We had a gymnasium, we had a cafeteria, and we said, maybe we can do that. But we also realized it was going to take a lot of work. And that's where George Kurtz came in so handy with the architect, Bob Fisher of Grants Pass. And they conceived a plan of going in and tearing out the insides which were built for barracks, pulling it all out, and then going ahead and revising it into a classroom. Well, there again is a place where George knew that the prison industries in Salem manufactured furniture. And he made an early contact with them to get enough furniture, and he was able to do that so that it would be delivered on time, and had them build all our furniture so it could move on in. So we moved all these things out, and it should be told pictorially. I'm sure there are pictures somewhere of what it looked like when they tore these barracks out, and all the toilets that were in the barracks, they put them out in the street to be picked up, you know. Well, here was this thing with this line of toilets down the street. And as not necessarily as you look at the campus now, which is so beautiful, I cannot believe it. This is 2008, and but it is. It looked. You look at that and you say, how in the world can anybody do enough in a few months now to be able to have classes in here? Well, we did. We were able to make them into classrooms, and in one way, a rather curious thing is the fact that it may have helped us more than anybody thinks to have had those early years in those makeshift facilities, because our appeal was to people who we didn't want to be scared off with the word college. We wanted people to realize that this was a place where they could get what they wanted, and it wasn't some place to train them to go on to university, all of them. Well, the people could do that too, but they could surmount this. But the other ones, they had probably the best example of it is the fact that we had one of our facilities was a learning center, and we did everything to help in whatever way people needed extra help in there. And we had a real skilled person, you have to talk about these beginnings, named Letha Backus. And Letha was a former elementary teacher, and she ran this learning center. And she set up her desk near the door leading out to the kind of an area there, and left the door open. And she had a coffee pot there. And she'd see people come up to this learning center who had been told to go to the learning center to get help, and they were afraid to come into this building. And she'd walk out and say, introduce herself, come on in, have a cup of coffee. And then before she knew it, she had them in learning classes, and then they'd have them in full-time classes, and then they'd end up graduating, and then they'd end up in a job. And that's the way the thing worked. It was just really hard to believe.
Yeah.
But anyway, another fascinating thing, when I say it may have helped us more than anything else, Tennyson Haley had been over at Southwestern Community College, our Dean of Student Services, and he's talking about our basic education program. And he said, we used to have a lot of those people there at Southwestern in the first years before our college buildings were built. He said, I used to have a lot of them. He said, and then we got the new buildings built, and they didn't show up. And we don't know what happened to them. Well, I knew what happened to them. They were scared off by those big buildings. And these people were not scared off by this. Now, one more story, and then I'll tell you the other one. People coming out here from Grants Pass, college was new. All they knew was a former job corps. They wondered what it was going to be like and what the other people were going to be like. The classes looked good, so they signed up for the classes. But what are the other students? We're going to college. What do we wear? What are the other people going to be like? So I went down the first day of classes to the cafeteria. After the first set of classes, when there was a break, the people came in. And I looked, and you could see the people coming in, and what they were doing was sizing up the other people. Who's here, and what are they like, and what are they wearing, and what do they need? And then you almost could begin to see, they're just like me. I haven't got anything to be afraid of. And you could just see the ice melt. And that's where the atmosphere of the college was born. Let's have another one.
Henry, you started to talk a little bit about the students and their reaction to the campus. Why don't you describe for us the different types of students that started to come out here in those early days?
Yes, well, I think probably one of the best examples I know, and sometimes the answer to the question is told by example, but they had I'd only been here for about, that campus had only been open for classes and for about 2 weeks, and I had an open door policy that anybody could come to and talk to me at any time. And that morning, there were 3 people from the welding class showed up, and you imagine they were kind of very rough, tough-looking characters, you know. And, well, they showed up in my office, and what can I do for you? They said, we went down to class this morning, and there's a note on the door. And the teacher said that he was called to Medford and that there'd be no class today. Well, what I want to know is what the hell's going on here. We paid our money to get welding and classes, and we're out here and we're not getting them. What's going on? Well, the thing was so different than anything I'd experienced. Of course, I came from the K-12 program, for one thing, but in my college experiences, when I had gone to college, if a peer person had gone up and the professor had put that kind of a note on the door, the students would have said, hooray, and they'd have headed for the coffee shop. But here, I had people who knew what they wanted. They paid their money to get what they wanted, and they had damn sure better get what they wanted, or else we're going to hear about it. Well, I think that was one of the biggest differences in the world. And the fascinating, too, to me, was the fact that in my class at Oregon State, I mentioned taking a class in community college, and as one part of it, they were studying about how colleges first began. They talked about them in the days of the Western Renaissance, when they had no learning at all. Learning just began to develop. And the first colleges began. The earliest ones were groups of students, and very, very often they'd be 6, 7, or 8 students who had a common thing they wanted to learn, would go around the village, or the town, or the township, or wherever they had to go to find a teacher who had what they wanted. And then they'd contract with this teacher, and the teacher would teach them what they wanted to know. And I had been in schools for so long where people said, we need to get back to the basics.
Yeah.
Well, this was about getting back to the basic, about as big a basic as you could, is to put the people who wanted to know in touch with somebody who could teach them. And that's what, it was very apparent that this was what was happening in community colleges. And so that was one of the big differences.
Great. We'll get into a little bit different set of questions here. What was the attitude of the four-year universities when you were president, and how do you think that's changed today?
Well, I think that at the time I came in, or even before, the four-year colleges hated to adjust to something new. I considered it like everybody. That's a common human trait. And it was very hard for them to adjust to community colleges as a competitor with them. And so turf wars were very, very common. They felt they were after the same students, and they would be taking students away from them. Now, that's not all completely true. There were exceptions. At University of Oregon was one of them, I know, that helped a lot with Lane Community College to get going. And one of the biggest and best supporters of community colleges was Dr. Robert McVicker, who was from Oregon State, who was a tremendous supporter of them. But by and large, they felt that competition. And that was especially true